Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This is Eisenherz and today we're going to have a look at the final turn of the recent Mox Masters Tournament, which was the topic for a lot of debate this past week. I will preface this by saying that one of the people involved is a good friend of mine, but I still try to analyze this situation as objectively as possible for me. So what exactly happened? In the final pot we had the following matchup. Player 1 was on Roger Silas, Player 2 was on Tim Najeska, Player 3 was on Thrasios Dargo, and Player 4 was on Kinnan. In the final turn, Player 2 went for a win attempt, and they cast a Grand Abolisher for protection. And that's when things started to get a little crazy. So let's have a look at it. As we all know, if the Grand Abolisher resolves, there's almost nothing you can do to stop an opponent from comboing off. So obviously, none of the other players wanted the Abolisher to resolve. But there was one crucial piece of information already known to the whole pot. Player 3 had a Mindbreak trap in hand, which was revealed earlier through a Thrasios activation, and they had enough mana to hardcast it. The issue here is that Player 3's Mindbreak trap alone won't be enough to stop Player 2's win attempt, because if that's the only interaction available, countering the Grand Abolisher won't make a difference, as the actual combo piece, in this case Dockside Extortionist, would resolve anyways. So Player 3 is in a weird spot. On one hand, all players need the Abolisher to be countered. But on the other hand, Player 3 needs support so that the Dockside can be countered as well. So Player 3 reaches out to the other two players in order to gain information about additional counterspells. And now a weird scenario of so-called priority bullying ensues. If any of the other players reveal that they have interaction for the Grand Abolisher, Player 3 can just pass priority to them, so that one of the other two players is forced to deal with the Grand Abolisher. The moment Grand Abolisher gets countered by one of the other players, however, Player 2 will most likely not cast their Dockside Extortionist to combo off, because there is still the Mindbreak trap in Player 3's hand. So, by gaining information, Player 3 can force their opponents to spend their resources to stop a win attempt, untap, and possibly try to combo off on their turn with more protection in their hand and less interaction in their opponent's hand. So, in theory, this is the most optimal way for Player 3 to handle this situation. Try to gain information from the other players and eventually leverage that information to make their opponents spend resources on each other instead of spending their own resources. Big brain move. In this situation, however, Player 4 is very aware of that. They do not want to reveal more information than necessary. The only thing they mention is that they can, quote, deal with the Dockside. So they want Player 3 to use their MBT, which again is open information, before they eventually deal with the Dockside. Doing it this way might not exile the Dockside, but it leaves Player 2 in a weird spot. They can risk to combo off and run into another counterspell, or they can just stop their win attempt and pass their turn. So for Player 4, it is the most optimal play to not reveal any information and have Player 3 use their MBT on the Abolisher. Player 4 then either counters the Dockside, or they can just keep their interaction in hand if Player 2 doesn't continue with their win attempt. Anyway, Player 3 either didn't hear that Player 4 can deal with the Dockside, or thinks that it's just not enough information to justify casting their MBT. Instead, they try to gain even more information, or make Player 4 activate Thrasios in order to dig for an answer. So Player 3 at this point is doing everything they can to make their opponent reveal more information or spend resources on a Thrasios activation. They do not simply trust that the other players will have an answer for the Dockside, and or just want to gain as much of an advantage as possible. All of which is definitely reasonable in theory, but in this situation didn't bring about the desired outcome. Player 4 did not reveal any more information and made it very clear that they will not respond to the Grand Abolisher or reset priority by tapping out for a Thrasios activation, because A. Player 3 could cast the MBT anyway, B. If Player 4 reveals any more information, they will be in a worse spot than Player 2 and 3, and C. Player 4 doesn't want to tap out in order to have mana open for Player 3's turn. What happened now is that in this game of CDH, a subgame of Chicken emerged. At this point I want to shout out Isaac King, who explained this very well in a recent Twitter post. The link to that post can be found in the description box down below. So player 3 knows that player 4 must have something or the game will end regardless of their MBT cast. Player 4, however, cannot reveal any information or they give player 3 more leverage. Player 4 also makes a credible commitment to not be extorted. To quote them, "If you pass prio, I will also pass prio. That's my final answer." Additionally, they already passed priority once, just for player 1 to reset it, but stating again that they will not give into the priority bullying. So now, the first player to use their resources will lose the game of chicken, but the game of CDH will most likely continue, and the player that didn't use their resources will have the bigger advantage. Player 3 can now take the risk that player 4 will not follow through with their intent of passing priority, which will let the Grand Abolisher resolve, or they can believe player 4, cast the Mindbreak trap, and trust that player 4 can eventually deal with the Dockside Extortionist as well. Player 4 can either follow through with their statement, or they can back down, cast whatever interaction they have, or activate Thrasios to reset priority, and be left in a much weaker spot. If neither player gives in, we are dealing with a so-called Brinkmanship strategy. Both parties go to the extreme and thereby risk disaster. Well, player 3 didn't believe player 4 would follow through with their statement. They passed priority to player 4, who actually followed through, also passed priority and let the Grand Abolisher resolve, which resulted in player 2 winning the game, although there were multiple pieces of interaction left in all players' hands. Both players did what increased their odds of winning the game of CDH the most. But as both of them pulled through, none of them got to actually win the game of CDH. Player 4, however, won the game of chicken that player 3 created. This has some inclinations for future games. For example, people will most likely not try this kind of stuff with player 4 again, and maybe be more careful with their politics in general, even against other players who might take this situation as an example. So last week, a lot of people asked, who is to blame here for this loss that could have been averted? Well, in my opinion, nobody should be blamed for the loss, but I think there is a huge difference in how both players acted and communicated in this situation. And I want to delve into that a little bit, because we can learn a lot more from that than from shifting blame. So I have no intent to badmouth anyone here, so I'll try to phrase the following section carefully. And I will not name any person because I don't want to throw shade on anyone. This was a high-stakes situation and probably also a high-stress situation for everyone involved. So even if I misphrase anything here, I just want to analyze what I observe and present it to my viewers. In my opinion, the whole scenario could have been avoided if player 3 didn't go overboard with their politics and didn't try to pressure player 4 into revealing more information. Let me explain why I think that by looking at the game state, the game theory, and the actual conversation that took place. Firstly, player 3 had already revealed information. This makes priority or mana bullying much more unpleasant for the other two players, because they immediately know that they are being priority bullied and are therefore less likely to act in the expected way. Secondly, player 4 already revealed to player 3 that they can deal with the eventual Dockside Extortionist. They didn't go into any detail, but they stated clearly that they can deal with it. Thirdly, player 4 also made it clear multiple times that they will not let themselves be priority bullied and not reveal any more information and are willing to lose the game if they are being forced into doing that. Fourthly, in CDH you play against humans, not computers. What might be the theoretically optimal play is not always the most optimal play in practice. And finally, player 3 tried to put a lot of pressure onto player 4 and blame them for the loss that could ensue, which player 4 was not having. In fact, player 3's use of language became increasingly aggressive, hostile and condescending, whereas player 4 kept his calm during the whole conversation. Let's have a look at a few notable parts of the conversation so you can see what I mean by that. These are not 100% exact quotes, but they are close enough and I made sure to not leave out anything significant, so here we go, let's have a look at it. In this short, maybe 2-minute conversation, I think we can see a good example on how to not talk to experienced players who will not give into pressure. Player 3 immediately starts off with, "Do you want to tell me what you have?" Which is a reasonable question, but also already expecting a free Gitaxian probe. They then asked another question. "What do we do here?" Which is still very reasonable. After this doesn't bring about the desired result, the tone changes from asking questions to shifting the responsibility, as well as making hostile statements like, "It's up to you," "You can activate Thrasios to reset priority," I think this is a little sus. After that also doesn't get player 4 to give in. The tone shifts once more and statements like, "You are the one getting screwed. If you want to lose, that's fine. Tell me what you have and I will interact. Follow." And finally, after still not getting the desired response, the tone shifts one more time to an ultimatum with, "Last chance, tell me what you have or I'm passing otherwise." Well, player 4 still didn't budge and the Grandebolsche resolved. Right after the game, after player 4 had already stopped conversing and the other players were still talking about the whole situation, player 3 made a final statement that, in my humble opinion, sounds pretty condescending, stating that, "I think he just wants to go to sleep," while referring to player 4, as if they were a child or simply couldn't handle the stress of a tournament. Personally, I feel that's a little unsportsmanlike to make a comment like that about an opponent, but that's just me. So, instead of looking at who to blame for this situation or for a loss that could be averted, let's just accept the result and see what we can learn from this situation for future games. My first lesson would be that priority bullying is maybe the best play in theory, but not always in practice. You have to remember that you play against humans, not computers. My second lesson would be that even the longest lever will break if you try to move an immovable object. At some point you just have to realize that politics will not always give you what you're expecting or what you want. My third lesson from this situation would be that you have to be respectful to all players at all points of the game. Remember that we're all humans and we make mistakes, and so do you. There is no perfect player. My fourth lesson would be that politics can lead to disaster. That's just a reality of a multiplayer free-for-all format, and we have to accept that sometimes this is the result of a game. And my final lesson would be, and I think this is the most important lesson from this whole situation, just don't try shit with my boy Brinkmeister Pong. And that's it. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, share the video with your friends, and if you have some insights about the situation, please leave a comment down below. And also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more content in the future. This is Eisenherz and auf Wiedersehen.